You ready?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Okay, cool. So today's demonstration is how to scratch and attach your sculptural details. First of all, just as a review, this is the Tupperware bin that I'm using for my sculptural details. I noticed that it stayed really, really wet over break, which is great. I have a couple things that I'm going to be scratching and attaching. This little feather and a couple spheres, and I made this pot Sunday. So every Sunday I try to, I spend 4 hours in the studio. So I made a couple pots to demonstrate on this week. I tied a knot in the top of my bag. That's probably not the best method because then you need a new bag every time. But because I did these on Sunday and I was traveling a lot with them, I didn't want the pot to become unraveled. When you are working on any pot at your table, my suggestion is that you take one of these blocks of wood from above the drill press and keep your pot on the block of wood at all times, like this, okay? That way, when you're handling your pot and moving it around, you're handling it like this instead of the actual pot that you could squish with your fingers and leave dents and things like that, okay? I've got damp paper towels, and this is like a little owl with a pot on its head. This is Cone 6 brown clay, and this is actually white porcelain. Porcelain is similar to the clay that we use for this class, except it's sort of like cream cheese. The reason we don't use it in this class is because it has a very, very smooth texture or lack thereof, and it literally is like throwing with cream cheese. Our clay, is has a little, believe it or not, a little grit to it. It has something called grog in it that makes it kind of grip onto our fingers a little more and makes it easier to pull and easier to throw without breaking or slumping or doing a lot of things like that. First thing you want to do when it's time to scratch and attach is you need to help yourself to a cup. I have larger cups for your clay, some vinegar. The vinegar is right next to the sink that we actually don't use for throwing, and a gallon jug, and it says white vinegar right on it. You don't have to use vinegar. The other thing that you can use, it's sort of like whatever you can take the smell of. If you hate the smell of vinegar, then the other option is to come over here to the throwing buckets, stick your hand in the throwing bucket, and grab some clay from the bottom of the throwing bucket. Some of us would not like to do that, but others might. That's actually what I use in my studio, because that is clay that has a little bacteria in it because it sat forever. It sat a long time, and so it's sticky. It's very sticky, so it works really well. Okay, this I just used a little vinegar. These cups are where the underglaze is in the kiln room. And we have some larger ones that I'll have available to you. Okay. Next thing is you need a banding wheel. So banding wheels, you really don't want to have your pot on the tabletop and be moving it, because it's not a smooth movement. A couple things happen. One thing happens is the height at the tables that you're at is real, like, isn't eye to eye with your pot. This gives your pot some height, so when you're sitting, it's almost eye level. You just get a better view of it when you're working on it, okay? The other thing it does is it helps you really see. Essentially what we're doing in here, we're making pottery, but they're like little sculptures. They should look good from every angle. If you're just looking at your pot from the front all the time, like if it's on your tabletop and you're not easily turning it, then chances are one half of your pot is going to look great and the back is going to look or have nothing. Chances are, if I made 2 pots in 4 hours, thrown, hand-built, scratched and attached together, put some porcelain on the eyes, and then I made an alligator that I'll show you tomorrow. So I did these, and I had 4 hours in the studio, and that included, my setup and cleanup and all that. Fact of the matter is, working quickly, I probably wouldn't have texture back here. It forces me to look at the whole thing, this banding wheel. The banding wheels are right underneath where the texture pads and sort of like the glazes are in between the 2 sinks that we don't use in the ceramics room. Okay. Next thing you need is a scratch and attach tool. All 3 are good for scratch and attaching. Toothbrush, it has gone through the dishwasher, okay? So this is before my family was introduced to electric toothbrushes. Toothbrush works great. Might be gross. It is sanitized, so not that gross. You could bring in your own if you want. I have a few of these like very expensive scratch and attach tools. These are made specifically for scratching and attaching. And depending on the size of the thing that you're scratching and attaching, you could use a simple needle tool. So what does scratch and attaching look like? It looks like this. And this is sort of like, I realize it's rewind to elementary school for many of us. I set this up on this bowl just so it would have an automatic curve. Keep in mind that clay has memory. If you leave it flat in anything, if you leave it flat, even if it feels wet, if you try to stick it to a curved surface, it will flatten out. It'll flatten out on its own. Weird, right? So if I had this feather in here flat, and then I tried to put it on a curved surface, it would have memory and not work so good. Okay? I'm going to scratch and attach this right on here. And so what I'm going to do is scratch the pot. And this is why we have a video, because I realize that some of you aren't really seeing this. Okay. Like this. And then scratch it both sides. The reason we scratch and attach is, think about this. What attaches better, 2 smooth things or 2 pieces of Velcro? Velcro, right? So you're like creating this texture that will stick this pot together. Okay. So I'm going to kind of have this as an interesting thing in the back. I'm going to have it off center, which is a risk for me because that's not really what I do. And I'm going to stick my finger or my tool in this stuff and just spread it on really well. Just like this. And then some on this side. And there's a thing about scratching. Do you know scratch marks, extra coils, stuff like that, are poor craftsmanship, but in the world of traditional pottery, if some of your scratch marks are showing, it's not considered bad craftsmanship. It's considered the artist showing how something is made. Weird, right? So if you've got some extra scratch marks hanging out, sometimes I actually leave them on purpose, and I will be, when I get a chance, doing some extra things to this stem. I didn't make the stem as detailed as it will be when this pot's finished, because it would just break off. This clay is still really wet. It was in here, and then about an hour ago, I put it on here, soaking wet. So it would have that memory, okay? And now I'm gonna put like these little spheres on here. I was influenced on my Pinterest by a Persian blue and white vase. And it had blue stripes, vertical stripes, and it had like these little like spheres around the top. And I was like, oh, that's beautiful. Everybody, and it's on, I believe, my history page. If not, I'll get it on there. Everybody and should really look at their history page to help them inform their decoration for their pots. Now, here's my type A personality. I'm going to start in the front center. This is something different for me. I scratched. You got to scratch both pieces. Just a little dab of this stuff. Just a dab is it. If I made all these in the same day, I wouldn't have to use this stuff. I wouldn't have to do it. Okay? And then if I want to clean off the extra, I just go like this. Okay? Other thing you want to think about, and I'm making it part of my scratch and attach demo, is hollowing out. If you're putting a lot of detail on your pot, you need to keep in mind the rule of thumb is don't go thicker than your thumb with your clay. It could just explode like a bomb. So what you're going to do is, and I just attached those, so this is risky. You're going to use your thumb as a guide and go around the edge like this. And then hollow out the interior by literally scooping